All right. Welcome to the fourth and one today. It's the week of the Pro Bowl. Everyone's super excited for that. I mean, not really because it's the Pro Bowl and who really cares? It doesn't mean anything. Players don't care. The players you want aren't in it. Players get voted in because they don't matter. But that's besides the point. Today on fourth and one, we're going to recap the AFC and NFC Championship games because those were massive blowouts, and we're gonna do that. So we're gonna look at it. So in the AFC title game, and unfortunately, this week I have no guest host. So just is what it is. You're just gonna have to listen to me talk for 40 minutes. Maybe not 40 minutes. We'll try and keep this one short today. So let's get right into it. In the AFC title game, that was the Steelers at the Patriots. The over-under for the game was 50.5. That came in. That was over. And New England covered the 6-point spread. Of all the stats I wrote down, I didn't write down the final score. I should have looked that up actually. Just a sec. But I mean, overall, the game was kind of a blowout and kind of a stinker of a game. I mean, the Patriots kind of just walked away with it. It was pretty much a one-sided game. I mean, Big Ben threw for 314 yards, while Tom Brady threw for 384 yards. Here we go. The scores. It was 36-17 for New England. So, again, just like a massive blowout and, not a competitive game at all. And, I mean, when you break it down, it's pretty clear. Like, when you go position by position, you'll see why the Patriots were just so much more dominant. So let's start with quarterbacks. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger, 31 for 47, 314 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and an 83.1 rating. Meanwhile, Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, was 32 for 42 for 384 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 127.5 rating. So already you can see that, like Tom Brady, he threw less attempts. He completed his attempts at a higher percentage for more yards. He had 2 more touchdowns and no interceptions. Clearly, the quarterback performance here goes to the Patriots. Tom Brady simply outplayed Ben Roethlisberger, and to me, like this one isn't even close. When it comes to running backs, we're talking about Le'Veon Bell for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we're not really talking about Le'Veon Bell because he got injured in the game with a groin injury. So he only had 6 carries for 21 yards. And so D'Angelo Williams, the backup running back in Pittsburgh, had to come in relief. And he was actually the lead back. So he had 14 carries for 34 yards with a 2.4 average yards per carry and 1 touchdown. Now, I mean, the touchdown is great, but a 2.4 yards per carry average, that's pretty atrocious. That's not very good. And again, 14 carries for 34 yards. Again, that's very dismal. That's pretty bad. On the other side of the ball, we had LeGarrette Blount. 16 carries, 47 yards, 2.9 average, and a touchdown. And like again, 1 touchdown is great, but the average and the total yards and the number of carries just wasn't really high. But what that tells you is like this game was dominated by passing. It was a very pass-heavy game. I mean, we go back to quarterbacks. The quarterbacks had 42 and 47 passing attempts respectively. So, I mean, clearly a game that was just dominated by the wide receivers. Speaking of wide receivers, let's go take a look. Antonio Brown was not the Steelers' top receiver on the day. He had 7 catches for 77 yards. That's 11 yards per catch, but no touchdowns. The Pittsburgh Steelers' leading wide receiver in the AFC Championship game was a receiver named Kobe Hamilton. 2 catches on 5 targets for 37 yards, 18.5 yards per catch, and 1 touchdown. So the reason why he's the number 1 receiver, I realize Antonio Brown had more yards and more catches, but Kobe Hamilton had a touchdown. And scoring, they lost the game, so scoring matters. So he's the number 1 receiver for the Steelers. On the Patriots side of the ball, we got Julian Edelman. He had 8 receptions for 118 yards, 14.8 yards per catch, 1 touchdown. But again, the top receiver on each team wasn't the number 1 receiver. The Patriots' number 1 receiver this game in the AFC title game was Chris Hogan. 9 catches on 12 targets. That's a great like you're catching 75% of your passes. That's fantastic. 180 yards. That's 20 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. So like Chris Hogan had a fantastic day. And I want to bring up the point of the Patriots. They ran a flea flicker in I think it was in the late in the first quarter. Now for those people who don't know what a flea flicker is, okay, the quarterback takes the ball, he hands it off to the running back. The running back runs forward a little bit, then pitches it back to the quarterback, and the quarterback then throws the ball down the field to an open wide receiver. This is like one of the most challenging and difficult trick plays for a team to run because there's so many components to it, and the Patriots run it so well all the time. I recently went to a game in Boston to go watch the New England Patriots, and they ran a flea flicker, and it was just great to see. It was a 67-yard pass when I was there. In the AFC title game, it was only a 43-yard pass, but nevertheless, the Patriots' ability to run deep throw trick plays regularly and consistently with high levels of success is one of the main reasons why the Patriots came out of this game winning, and winning by a large margin. If you look at the stats of it, I mean, so in terms of first downs, Pittsburgh had 22, New England had 26. So I mean, New England wins that battle. In third down efficiency, Pittsburgh converted on third down on 9 of 15 attempts for 60%, whereas New England converted on 11 of 17, which is 64.7%. So New England converted their third down attempts at a higher percentage than the Steelers did. The Steelers were 0 for 1 on fourth down, and the Patriots didn't have to go for it on fourth down because they were winning. So, again, win for New England. In rushing yards, New England had 57 total rushing yards to Pittsburgh's 54. Again, New England wins that. Passing yards, again, we see New England win. 314 for the Steelers and 374 for New England. In total yards, it's 368 for Pittsburgh and 431 for New England. Sacks is where we get actually an interesting. Pittsburgh wins the sacks column. They had 2 sacks for a total of 10 yards lost, and New England wasn't able to bring any pressure for most of the they rushed guys, but they never managed to get any sacks. They had 0 sacks in the game. Ben Roethlisberger did throw an interception to Tom Brady's 0, so again, the Patriots win that column. In terms of punts, the Patriots win that one. They had 2 punts that averaged 48.5 yards, whereas the Steelers had 4 punts that averaged 38.5 yards. So again, punting less means you're holding on to the ball for a longer time. Holding on to the ball for a longer time allows you to score more points, and it prevents your opponent from scoring points. And that's definitely one of the most important factors. In terms of penalties, the Pittsburgh Steelers had 3 penalties for 19 yards, and the Patriots had 2 penalties for 10 yards. So overall, a very clean game, which you sort of expect, but you sort of don't. I mean, Bill Belichick is a very detail-oriented coach, and so you don't expect the Patriots to take a lot of penalties, and they didn't. But at times in the past, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been very undisciplined, and so them taking only 3 penalties for 19 yards is a little bit out of character, and it shows that they actually put a little more preparation into this game than previous playoff games that they've had in the past. Say when they played the Cincinnati Bengals last year in the playoffs, and several players were ejected. So this year, the AFC Championship game had a lot more cleanliness to it. It wasn't so dirty, and the players kept their emotions in check and just played within the rules. And the last stat I got for you here is time of possession. And again, and I hate saying this again, but like New England wins. New England had the ball for 31 minutes and 26 seconds, while the Steelers had the ball for 28 minutes and 34 seconds. And like you can just see all over the place here, like, you know, in virtually every category except for sacks, the Patriots have the better numbers. And so if you want to know why the Patriots won that game and why Tom Brady is going to his 7th Super Bowl, it's because the Patriots won all the important stat categories. They were the better team on in and out in every position. They had focused on the details more than everyone else. And I'm really looking forward to uh, a great Super Bowl matchup because the New England Patriots were the number one seed in the AFC. They earned it. Tom Brady was suspended for 4 games. They went 3-1 as his absence, and then he came back and he threw 28 touchdowns to 2 interceptions all season. Okay, Tom Brady is playing phenomenal. He is the absolute undisputed greatest quarterback of all time, and he has earned this. And he sat out that suspension, and now if he wins that fifth Super Bowl, it's going to be a very awkward moment between him and Roger Goodell because Roger Goodell has been on a vendetta to get Tom Brady and make the Patriots pay for his previous mistakes in Spygate, which happened in 2005. I'm not going to get into that, but it's very awkward. It's going to be very awkward if Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl after having sat out his suspension for Deflategate. I mean, he sat out the suspension, and it looked as if the league had won that battle. And then he comes back and he's like, "Look, I'm so good. You can suspend me for 4 games, and I'll still win the Super Bowl." That's how good he is. There has never been a quarterback like Tom Brady previously, and there never will be. And that's just the hard fact of it. And unfortunately, right now in the AFC, I don't think there's another team that's even remotely close to the level and quality of team and talent that the Patriots are. And people are going to say, well, the Patriots aren't that talented. They don't have that many good players. That may be true, but their coaching staff is phenomenal, and their coaching staff doesn't make them do things they can't do. So they don't have guys who can play man-to-man coverage on the outside on a wide receiver. So they don't play man coverage. They play a lot of zone coverage. They don't. They do what their players can do. That's what the coaches get them to play, and they don't make them play outside of that. And they're very good at getting the very best out of what they've got, and that's why the Patriots are the best team in the AFC. I think the next best team might be like the Oakland Raiders, but they need a few more pieces on defense. Their offense is fantastic, but the Raiders, they need to take get rid of a lot of their penalty problems and get better on defense. And so right now, like in the AFC, I don't think there's another team that's even close to the Patriots. I guess I'll move on to the NFC title game. That was another stinker. The over under that was set at 60 points, and the over came in on that one because the score was 44-21 for Atlanta over Green Bay. And obviously Atlanta covered the 5-point spread. So, again, another kind of stinker of a game. Atlanta got up 17-0 very early, and Green Bay just couldn't catch up. Going into this game, the Packers had won 8 straight games, and the Falcons had won 5 straight. But the Falcons just have the better team, hands down, all around. Both teams had terrible defenses coming into this game, but the Atlanta defense was marginally better. But if we look at it, let's start with the quarterbacks, okay? Aaron Rodgers was 27 for 45 for 287 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 91.6 rating. Meanwhile, Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons was 27 of 38, 392 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 139.4 rating. I also want to bring something up about the 392 yards. That's the 4th most passing yards in an NFC title game since the NFC title game was introduced at the start of the Super Bowl era. Matt Ryan also owns the record for most yards in an AFC title game at 396. 392 is the 4th most, and I just wanted to point that out. So if you look at this, Matt Ryan's better overall. He had a better completion percentage. He threw for more yards, more touchdowns, less interceptions than Aaron Rodgers. And the rating, I think the quarterback rating, a lot of people don't put a lot of stock into quarterback rating, but I think in this instance it's very important. Aaron Rodgers had a 91, which you kind of consider to be league average. Ben Roethlisberger had 83, and Tom Brady had 127 in the other game. 91 is kind of around league average. But Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan had 139.4. Perfect is 153.8. Matt Ryan almost had a absolutely perfect quarterback rating in that game, meaning that he could not have played any better um, than what he had played. So I just want to point that out. I mean, that's pretty big. Like when you're talking about people talk about Aaron Rodgers as this elite quarterback, and people always question Matt Ryan. They say, can he actually win a Super Bowl? Is he actually good enough? And I think that game really cements Matt Ryan's legacy as, worthy of the third overall pick when he was drafted, and it really cements his value to the Falcons as a franchise quarterback in the upper echelon of quarterbacks. I won't say he's elite yet. I think to be elite, you have to have several years of just dominance in your division and in your conference. So I don't think he's elite yet, but I think he's on the verge of being elite. Unless he takes a massive step backwards next year. I think if he's playing this well next year, I think he's on track to be one of those elite NFL quarterbacks. Moving over to the running backs in this game, the running back play in this game was pretty pitiful. I didn't think running backs could be worse than the AFC title game where they had 6 carries and 16 carries, but this is actually worse. Ty Montgomery for the Packers had 3 carries for 17 yards with a 5.7 average, 0 touchdowns and 0 fumbles. But when you only carry the ball 3 times, you make it really easy for the opposing defense to just sit back and play pass defense because they don't have to worry about you running the ball. On the other side of the ball, Devonta Freeman had 14 carries for 42 yards, 3 yards per carry, no touchdowns, no fumbles. So, again, like 14 carries isn't really that many, but in Atlanta, there's also Tevin Coleman, so the carries are split pretty evenly. Atlanta at least has a very capable running game. They can move the ball, running the ball, whereas the Packers are just embarrassing at running back. And I said this in my preview to the NFC title game that having a wide receiver in Ty Montgomery as your primary running back was going to really hurt the Packers in their ability to produce offense in the game, and it shows because he had 3 carries. So what is Aaron Rodgers supposed to do but just throw the ball like every play? Like it's just unfair to the rest of the offense when you have a wide receiver playing running back because you have no running backs. It's just embarrassing for the Packers, and they really need to reevaluate how they draft and develop their running backs. I'd like to see them stick with Eddie Lacy for another year. Give him another shot. See if he can get back on his winning ways from his rookie season. But they really do need to find a solution to running back in Green Bay because they did try and use a fullback for 3 carries. And on one of his 3 carries in the first quarter, he fumbled the ball and gave the ball right to Matt Ryan. And it's just unfortunate that between an actual fullback and a wide receiver who's been made to play running back, you've got 6 carries for like 40 yards and a fumble. That's just pitiful on the Packers, and they deserve to lose this game because they don't have good personnel management from their front office. They have seriously mismanaged how this team has transitioned from their Super Bowl to the current team they have now, and they really deserve that the blame to be placed on the front office and the team management for not having an adequate roster. Looking at wide receivers now, just to kind of lighten up the mood. Jordy Nelson had 7 catches for 78 yards, 11.2 yards per catch, and 1 touchdown, but he wasn't the top receiver in Green Bay that day. It was actually Jared Cook. He had 7 catches on 12 targets, 78 yards, 11.1 yards per catch, and a touchdown. I just want to point out, though, Jared Cook is not a wide receiver. He's actually a tight end. And again, this comes back to the poor management of the Green Bay Packers roster. They've got a tight end as their top receiver in an NFC Championship game Again, it's just unacceptable, and you're not going to win with that kind of roster management. On the other side of the ball, it was absolutely fantastic. It was a display of what everything a wide receiver should and can be. Julio Jones, 9 catches on 12 targets, 180 yards, 20 yards per catch, and 2 touchdowns. This is the Julio Jones that everyone expected when he was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. Most of this season, Julio Jones had very pedestrian numbers. He was very average. He had a couple games where he had huge numbers, but then he had a bunch of games where he had very, very poor numbers. But Julio showed up when it mattered. NFC title game, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. That is monster. That is everything that you expect from a premier elite number 1 wide receiver. And this puts Julio in that discussion for best wide receiver in football with Antonio Brown. It really solidifies the notion of him being an absolutely elite wide receiver. If we look at the stats, I mean, just like with the New England and Pittsburgh game, where New England won most of those stats, Atlanta's won most of these stats, and it shows. The stats are very reflective of the score. I mean, 44-21. You're going to expect Atlanta to be significantly better than Green Bay in all of these categories. So looking at it, first downs, Green Bay had 24, Atlanta had 30. On third down percentage, going forward on third down and converting, Green Bay was atrocious. They were 4 for 10 for 40%, which is, if you're not converting at least like 60%, you might as well kiss your chances of winning goodbye, because 40% is just not going to cut it. And again, I put it on the team management, and I blame the GM and the president of the club for just having poor roster management and not surrounding Aaron Rodgers, an elite quarterback, with the talent necessary to win Super Bowls. It's just not there, and they have severely mismanaged this roster. On fourth downs, the Packers were 2 for 2. They were 100%, but Atlanta had zero, didn't have to go for it on fourth downs because they were winning. When it comes to rush yards, Green Bay had 99, Atlanta had 101. I know that's not a big difference, but the fact that Atlanta had more rushing yards, the better team with more points had more yards. I just want to point that out. Like, it's not a big difference, but it's an important difference. When it comes to passing yards, the Packers had 268 to Atlanta's 392. Adding that all up for total yards, the Green Bay Packers at 367. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Falcons had 493, almost 500 yards of offense. So again, it's just an incredible difference here that Atlanta's offense is so potent, and they can basically score at will from any starting position on the field, whether you back them up inside their own 5 or you start them at the 50-yard line. Atlanta can score points whenever they want. They just have to say, okay, we're going to run this play, and it works. Their offense is fantastic. Kyle Shanahan has done a remarkable job transforming that offense. Dan Quinn, the head coach, when he was hired 2 years ago, has done a terrific job in transforming that club into a winning culture and creating winning values among that team. Looking at sacks, Green Bay had 0 sacks. Their pass rush was terrible, and I've been saying this all year. Anyone who knows me knows that I think the Green Bay defense wasn't very good. It's not elite. People get it wrong. Julius Peppers is old. He's not an elite pass rusher anymore. Clay Matthews is hurt far too often, and when he's on the field, he tries to play through injuries that are far too significant, and the Green Bay defense just can't get a pass rush going, and they're really atrocious. So, again, I just think it's poor management. They don't have the pieces. You're trying to sign 36-year-old players to do what you could draft a rookie player to do with Julius Peppers. And Clay Matthews is just hurt too often to be called an elite linebacker in the NFL. Whereas Atlanta had 2 sacks for 19 yards because Atlanta has been drafting defense the last couple of years, and their GM has really been focusing on the defensive side of the ball because for a few years now, Atlanta's offense has been just roaring along. So for a few years now, the Atlanta offense has been fine, and Atlanta said, "Look, we need some defensive pieces." So they went and drafted some defensive guys. They went and signed some defensive veteran players, and it shows in this game. Interceptions thrown. Aaron Rodgers had one interception thrown. Matt Ryan threw 0. So again, the win goes to Atlanta there. In terms of punts, the Packers actually win this one. They had 2 punts for 54 yards, and Atlanta had 2 punts for 38.5 yards. So again, punting the ball, it just the more punts you have, the more punts you have, the more often you're giving the ball back to the other team. And while Green Bay has a great punter who can punt very far and can pin other offenses deep in their own zone, it's just not enough when you're playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have such a potent offense, and you're continually giving them the ball back. We're looking at penalties here. Green Bay had 6 penalties for 63 yards, while Atlanta had 4 penalties for 31 yards. So again, this game had quite a few more penalties than the AFC game, but looking at it, you can see Green Bay had 2 more penalties, but those 2 extra penalties resulted in an additional 32 yards that they were penalized. So you're already giving the 7th most potent offense in NFL history an additional 30 yards for free because you took 2 additional penalties, which I think is just like you're asking for trouble there. Now we look at fumbles. The Packers had 1 fumble and they lost it. Meanwhile, Atlanta had 2 fumbles, but they retained both of those. They got in the piles and they got those fumbles back. And then time of possession, it's not really even close here. Green Bay had 26 minutes and 21 seconds, while Atlanta had 33 minutes and 39 seconds. So just looking at both games, overall, they both kind of sucked. They were both huge blowouts. The best team won in both games, fortunately, and it should make for a really exciting matchup in the Super Bowl. I'll be doing my Super Bowl preview next week after the Pro Bowl. I'm not doing any coverage of the Pro Bowl because I think it's kind of a waste of time. So I'll see you all next week in the 4th and 1. Hopefully I'll have a guest speaker or another guest co-host to help me with the Super Bowl one. I'm really looking forward to that. And remember to like us on Facebook and follow our YouTube channel. New videos every week. This has been the 4th and 1 podcast doing a recap of the AFC title game.